First, I want to thank you all for coming. When I worked on the exhibition text with Clarence, I started with a rhetorical question. Where do the narratives we embrace, the myths we create, and the truths of our reality converge? And I want you to think about that for the duration of our conversation. Clarence, most of these people probably don't know where you're from. Can you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
From here, right? I'm from Brooklyn, maybe 10 blocks down the street. Still have family here, a few blocks down the street. I have friends who live 3 blocks away. Yeah, born and raised here, and I went to college in North Carolina. Liked it so much, I never came back. So yeah, I live in North Carolina now, but I still come back from time to time.
And what was it like growing up in Brooklyn?
I tell everybody it was like the movie Crooklyn. That was my life, right? You grow up playing in the neighborhood. You have friends, family that you can always go to their houses and eat if you need to. Played outside all day. I didn't get into any trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a lot of differences between North Carolina and Brooklyn. And what's different about North Carolina and living there?
Well, it's a little different because I was basically an adult by the time I went to North Carolina, right? I think it's a cool place to raise a family. Kids can go outside. I don't have to worry about anything. I was able to buy a house like in college, right? So there's a lot of economic opportunity early because I guess everything's a little less expensive. If you're from New York and you go there, I think it's real easy because we still have like the grit and the hustle, and you know, just go down there and out hustle everybody.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so, but your path to become an artist wasn't linear.
Nope.
You worked after college in another line of work, and
Yep.
then you revisited art.
Yeah.
But what was your first experience like drawing or painting growing up?
My earliest memories are probably like coloring in coloring books with my mom. Yeah, to me, I thought that's what art was. Like, she used to color, like, outline the stuff and then shade inside. I always thought that was super cool, so I spent a lot of time doing that. So if I wasn't outside, like, trying to play basketball, trying to make the league like everybody else, I was in the house, like, just coloring. And I had an uncle who used to draw these Flintstone characters all the time. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure that stuff out. And then, you know, eventually you get good at it.
So then you went to college, and then you started working, and then at a certain point, you decided to revisit art. And what was that like? And what was the, you know, impetus for that change?
I mean, all the credit goes to my wife. We went to school together, high school together in Manhattan. I was an art major, she was a vocal major. We got married, and I was a truck driver for 12 years. And one day I came home and I was just like, I can't do this no more. Like, I hate this job. And she was just like, well, you're not happy because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to be doing, like, since you know so much? Yeah. She was like, oh, well, when I met you, you were an artist. You were supposed to be an artist. I thought you were going to be this artist. You know, I sat with that for a while, and one day I came home from work, and she turned one of our spare bedrooms into like a studio for me. And I was like, oh, well, you know, make art basically. So I would do that on the weekends and sometimes on the evenings. And then finally she was just like, hey, it's been a while, you know, it's time for you to quit. I was just like, I mean, I don't really have my stuff together to quit. And she was like, nah, you'll figure it out. And I kind of took advantage of it because in my mind, I'm like, well, if it doesn't work, I could be like, hey, this is your fault.
It's her fault.
Right? But she was like, nah, just do it. Like, she wrote my resignation letter and everything. So I just went to work one day, turned it in, and by this time, I wasn't driving trucks anymore. I got promoted, so I worked in the office. Like, they took my computer, they took my keys, they took everything. Like, so I sat there for 2 weeks, basically, thinking about like what I'm gonna do. I Googled how to be an artist. So I started watching YouTube videos and all these people talking. and I found out about residencies. So in college, I didn't know anything about residencies because I majored in art education. I found out about residencies and I just started applying because now I had work that I had been making in this at home. I got a residency, and that was like the best thing ever because they gave me a studio in downtown Raleigh outside of my house, and they gave it to me for a year, and at the end of the year you have a show. It was the best and the worst thing because I was supposed to have a show at the end of the year and COVID happened. All right, so my show got pushed back, which was good because I had time to make a couple extra paintings. But then like I never got the big opening, reception, and all that stuff. And
Talk in the gallery.
I didn't do any of that. It was appointment only. And,
Right.
But while I was at my residency, I met some influential people who taught me how to do certain things. So this guy told me how to write a letter to companies to get them to come out and see. So I wrote letters to like curators, museum directors. I let them know like it'll be only private appointment if you want to come see the work. Every appointment booked up, and they had to extend my show like an extra month because I had so many appointments. But I made sure to be at every appointment and meet everybody one-on-one. So like if it was date night, I was there. If it was a curator, I was there. If it was a director, I was there. And that went a long way because after the show was over, museums, I sold a couple paintings to museums. I ended up getting gallery representation out of that. I was on everybody's radar, so I started getting invited to like museum shows and stuff, and then like everything changed from there.
And you kind of alluded to the time period because you mentioned COVID. What were you making during that time, and how has it evolved?
Oh, so the work looked different. There weren't as many big paintings, and I mean, the green wasn't a thing back then. It was, flesh tones. But the subject matter was similar because it was still about my experience, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Right.
It just looked it felt a little different, but you could still tell it was me.
Right. Well, you can easily tell it's you now with the green and the paintings.
There weren't as many self-portraits back then. Well, there were
Right.
some, but there was more of probably my family members.
Thinking about the color though, when did the elements of green come into play, and what does it signify to you?
The green came into play around 2020, 2021,
Yeah.
after that first show, actually. Because now, after that show, I ended up having like a regular studio space. I had an idea to make a series of works based on these little green army men. So like when I was a kid, I used to always get these little green army, like they from the dollar store, like little toy soldiers. And I was gonna have the series called Toy Soldiers, where I was painting like black men as these little soldiers. And I did like one painting, and I painted the guy green or whatever, and I was like, man, this is kind of corny. I don't know if I want to do this. But then I had a studio visit with an artist that I really, really respect. He walked in and he saw all my other stuff, and he was like, oh, no, this is cool. And then he stopped when he saw that green painting. He was like, yo, what is that? And I was explaining it to him, and he was just like, I think you should explore that. And I was like, yeah, okay. But I just left it there. I kept painting, making other paintings, but the green paintings just sat there. And then George Floyd happened. And when George Floyd happened, I started thinking about how the media dehumanized him. And I was like, man, they don't even see him as a person. They just, right? He's become like a martyr for something I don't think he wanted to be. And I saw everybody painting pictures of him. And I'm like, man, I want to do something. But like, I don't want to be the guy painting like this picture of George Floyd.
Right.
So that's where the idea of the media came in, right? Because I started thinking about like how the media shows blackness, and then I started thinking about green screen. And green screen probably came up because I was looking at this green painting every day, but subconsciously it was there. And then I made this painting called Invisible Man because once I started looking at chroma key, which is green screen, I realized with that, if you put green in front of green, it becomes invisible. And I was already thinking how nobody saw George Floyd like he was invisible. So the first painting was me. It was a kind of big painting, me on the floor in the same position as George Floyd, naked, but not naked, because my wife told me I couldn't go all the way. But I went as far as I could, so it implies nakedness. I mean, but it was green, and the whole background was green, which is me on the floor, Invisible Man. And at the same time, thanks to my first show, when I had all the studio visits, I had a museum curator come in for a studio visit, and they were already asking me to do a show. So when they came and saw that painting, and they was like, hey, we want to offer you the show, what are you going to make work about? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm looking at this, I'm exploring this right here, because they saw all the brown stuff. So when they came to the studio, they're like, well, what is that? And I was like, well, this is my idea for this. And I was like, well, I want to explore more. And they said, okay, cool. And I had like a year and a half to put a show together. So I ended up putting the show together based on that painting. So I said, if this were to happen to me, what would happen to like my ecosystem? What would happen to my immediate family, people in the neighborhood? That's also the first time I did like a call for models to get somebody outside of my immediate family. And it was kind of sad because by this time I had like 1,000 Instagram followers, so I thought I was famous. Only one person responded. Only one person responded, so that's the only person who ended up in that show outside of my family. But it was cool because she was an activist.
Right.
And she was an artist, and I was like, you know what, this is great because if anybody were to ride for me, if this happened, it would be her because this is what she does. So I made a painting of her called Sing For Me, based after that Kendrick Lamar song. If this were to happen, who would be the person to sing for me?
You know, not every artist wants to confront the vulnerability of painting themselves in a painting. What makes you different?
I don't know any other way. I mean, I want my work to be honest. I guess it goes back to that first residency when I had a meeting with the director and I was painting Martin Luther King, right? And she was just like, nah, you need to paint something real. I'm like, what's more real than my experience? And in a way, it makes it easy because I can make paintings about anything that happens to me today, right? Like, I always use this analogy, but we had pancakes this morning, right? They were good pancakes. If I'm not working on anything, I'll sit there and just paint the pancake, or like just to keep working my muscle, but also it's like, hey, this is still documenting my experience.
Right.
You guys might never see it, but you know, I'm always working on something.
And you're often incorporating the rest of your family in your work, especially your daughters. What's that like for you, and what's that like for them?
I mean, for me, they're just part of my story. For them, I think, for some reason, they think they're famous. Yeah.
Kind of like you with 1,000 Instagram followers, right?
Yeah, right. So I feel like Shaq, like when he tells his kids, "You not rich, I'm rich." Like, so it's kind of like that. But nah, I enjoy it. They get to see themselves. Like when I was growing up, if I went to a museum, I never saw myself, right?
Right.
Like my daughters are in permanent collections in museums. Like they go in the museum and there's a picture of them right there, right? Like their friends go to the museums for class trips, and they're there. They're like, "Oh my God, that's," you know, they get to, so they're super confident because they're like, "Okay, we belong here," right? Like, and I didn't have that, but so I love just being able to give that to them, and I love being an artist, right? I'm showing them that they can do whatever they want. They can be whatever they want. Like they don't remember me having a job. This is all they know, right? They come to the studio and help. I mean, I have paintings in museums that I've done with my smallest daughter because she wants to be an artist, so I'm giving her access already. So, I mean, to me, I guess I don't want to say regular, but it's just part of my life.
Right. And you know, a lot of Black artists in particular talk about not having those early experiences or that access. What do you think changes for them in the future with having this early access to institutions, artists, and actually them being famous?
It normalizes it, right? So if it's normal, then it's an expectation. So they expect to be in the room, right? They expect to have access. I mean, they know they have to still work and do their part, but like they know if they work hard, then they deserve to be there.
And let's get into the exhibition. The American Fiction. When you thought of this title, what did that mean to you?
You want the honest, the real answer?
I want the real answer.
I don't want to get in any trouble. So the first painting I made in the series is the title piece, American Fiction, right? I just made a painting because I was feeling this tension, this way. I mean, I did that painting. I started at like the end of 2023, so everybody thinks it's about like what's going on now, but even before that, I was already feeling it in the air. So I made this painting, and my wife came to the studio. I told her what I was working on, but I didn't tell her like the details. And she came and saw it, and she said, "You can't put that out." And I said, "What you mean?" She was just like, I don't know if it's safe for you to put that out. I said, well, what if I don't put it out by itself? And she was like, well, I need to see what the rest of the work looks like. So then I made I kind of, in a way, directed a film where I made other pieces to go before and after it. And now when she saw it in its context, and now it's like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing now. Thank her again for American Fiction.
Well, speaking of the storytelling of the singular exhibition, have you ever done that before?
Yes, so my first exhibition, I did it. I had another exhibition in between where I did it, but the pieces were smaller. Yeah, so when I'm making work, I'm usually thinking about okay, it starts with one piece, right? And then it's like, why did I make that piece? And it's just pieces, okay, how did I get to this feeling? So pieces before,
right.
And then what happens after I feel this. So yeah, I'm always thinking in series like that.
And you mentioned to me that film inspired you to make this work in this way, like films like Fruitvale Station. What about that film in particular gave you the notion of this inspiration to make it a cinematic experience?
Because when I thought about the tension I was feeling, I related that to the tension that you can feel when you're watching Fruitvale Station, right? And then ultimately what happened, how it climaxed. To me, that painting was kind of like the climax. So I kind of started thinking about the day, because the Fruitvale Station really was like a day in the life, it was a journey. So that's how I built this exhibition, a day in the life, which is why the main character technically are the sneakers, right? Because I want you to walk in my shoes for the day, right?
Right.
And feel the steps that I'm taking. But yeah, a lot of my favorite movies are like Juice. Juice is multiple days, but it feels like a day in a life. All of this happened in one day. Yeah.
And symbols have always been embedded into your work, some obvious, some nuanced. In this particular series, you have flags, camouflage, and shoes. Walk us through those symbols and what they mean in this show.
All right, so in this series, the shoes, like I said, are just the main character. So it's just, a day in the life, or put yourself in my shoes. That's the mindset. The camo, which is in a lot of my work, it's like a symbol of the war. I call it's basically genocide, right, against black bodies in this country, historically, and currently too, right? And the flag is, to me, it's a symbol of home. And to me, it's a symbol of me owning it, ownership, because I feel like this is my country too. This is our country too. So to me, for me to hold it, it's just I'm taking control.
Right. And speaking of this being your country and our country, in this moment, that notion has been tested. How do you feel today versus what you see for the future, for example, your children?
It's a tough situation, but I feel like it's gonna affect my children, but I think I'm in a privileged position. So for instance, I've been having a conversation with people about just moving and leaving the country, right? We're blessed enough to be in a position where if I had to, I could. But also, why should we have to, right? So I think having conversations with them about it, my youngest daughter watches the news every morning, right? So she has 10 questions before we even leave for the ride for school. So it's being honest with them and telling them how I feel and what I think is going on, or at least what we see is going on, to the best of my ability, and just talking them through it and letting them know home is a safe space, and outside might be crazy right now, but you're safe. But I don't really know the answer to the future, what's going to happen. Things look bad, but I don't know how bad they can really get.
And speaking of now, how important is telling these type of stories through your voice of using visual arts?
I think it's super important because when we look back on history, the first things that we see, it's art, right? Like, you go back to the cave paintings, but also, like, in empires, the first thing they try to destroy is art, right? Because art documents what happened or what's going on and tells the truth. So I feel like it's my responsibility to document my experience because I feel like it's a relatable experience, and I feel like I'm documenting the truth. So, like, it's gonna be here when I'm not here. So I want people to see this in 100, 200 years and know what was going on.
What's something we didn't talk about this exhibition that you want the viewers to know?
Man, that wasn't in the notes. Nah, what I want them to know?
Yeah.
Nah, it's available. Nah, some of the pieces are available. There's a lot of symbolism, like, so if you do have questions, ask them, like, no question is a bad question. It's really personal, like, there's a lot of personal, like, nuggets in every painting. It comes from an honest place. I don't know, I guess they would have to ask me what they want to know.
So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to go with some rapid fire questions, and you can answer them either or you can give detailed responses.
All right, let's do it.
Recognition now or larger impact later?
Larger impact later.
Diversity or equity?
Equity.
I want to push back and ask why.
I think equity gives you access. Diversity checks a box.
Right, right. Art as a mirror or art as a hammer?
Art as a mirror, because the truth hurts more than a hammer.
Yeah. Jacob Lawrence or Romare Bearden?
Jacob Lawrence. I'm a painter.
Why?
I'm a painter.
Kerry James Marshall or Barclays Hendricks?
Barclay Hendricks.
Yeah.
He's the GOAT.
Jean-Michel Basquiat or Robert Colescott?
Basquiat.
Alma Thomas or Sam Gilliam?
Alma Thomas.
Why?
I don't really care about breaking the canvas.
Truth hurts. Charles White or Ernie Barnes?
Charles White. He's an amazing draftsman.
Yeah. Do you still draw?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a prerequisite.
How frequently do you draw?
Every day. I'm in the studio every day.
Yeah. What's a day in the life of Clarence Heyward like?
We get up at 6, take a shower. After all that stuff, make breakfast, take the girls to school, go to the studio. I get to the studio at 8:30 every morning. I leave at like 3:40.
And we didn't talk about your process from start to finish. Walk me through creating a painting.
Depends if I know what I'm making or I'm just in the studio. So if I know what I'm making, then I already know what I'm making. And I get there, either I'm drawing first, I'm already have a painting that I'm working on. If I don't know what I'm making, I'll go in the studio. I'm on Instagram like everybody else. I'm listening to music. I'm looking through National Geographics. Like, I'm just doing random stuff until I get some kind of inspiration. But like, if I make it to lunchtime and I'm not painting, then like, that's when the random stuff comes. Like, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make some collages today, or I'm gonna paint something weird, or like, I'm just doing something to me. I'm like, I have to do something every day. Nowadays, it's like I'm always working for something. I have something coming up, so it's just like, I don't really have time to play around. When I get there, I'm working.
Yeah. I asked that rhetorical question in the beginning. Did you have any time to think about it?
Ask it again?
Yeah. Where do the narratives we embrace, the myths we create, and the truths of our lives converge? I think it's rhetorical, but I think one answer could be like right here in spaces like this, where we get the opportunity to tell the truth and create our own narratives.
I agree. I mean, the answer I was thinking, I was gonna say like in the work, right?
Right.
Well, it was two answers. One was gonna be in our minds,
Right.
And the other was gonna be in a work. but places like this works.
Yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I did want to open it up for questions from the audience as well. So if any of you have questions.
You're asking us to walk in your shoes and as if they're memoirs, so making you a memoirist. Do you also write to process your experiences and then have those thoughts transfer into your paintings?
No, I probably should, but that is not a part of my practice. Like, I'm so busy, like, thinking about I don't even sketch that much, to be honest. Like, I draw for the painting, right? But, like, all the thoughts are in my mind. I guess I'm like Biggie, where I don't write my raps down, right? Like, it's a Brooklyn thing.
I wanted to get your thoughts about Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance and whether it informs your future work, and in many ways it almost parallels or echoes your exhibit. Can you talk about your reflections and whether that will influence the future paintings that will come forward?
All right. Well, I made this work before the halftime performance. To answer your question, no, I don't think I would make work based on like his performance. I think it was cool. It was his art, right? Like he did what he does. But no, like I make work about things that affect my life, and like the bell bottoms didn't affect my life, so yeah.
Thank you. Your reflection and your comment about your work being here 200 years down the line, how do you preserve it for that longevity?
Well, outside of like institutions are a good place, right? Like Smithsonian's, well, they're controlled by, a lot of them are controlled by the government, so that makes it tough. But so besides institutions, I feel like being like a personal steward of the work and like the work becoming like a family heirloom and you passing it down is one way, because it stays in the family and you can still loan it out to institutions so other people can see it, or like, you know, there's museums at universities, you can do that kind of thing. I mean, that's probably the biggest way. Like, as a community, we kind of need to hold on to our work. Like, I keep at least one painting from every series. One, just so my kids will have equity in the work. Like, eventually when this work is $1 million, right? I don't want to have sold it my whole life and then my kids don't have anything but to be able to go to the museum and say my daddy did that, right? So I leave them with work. So like when it does get that way, they have it too and they can sell it or whatever, but they have the equity. But yeah, I would say as a community, we need to be stewards of the work and hold on to our stories, because I mean, I guess I'm on record, 70% of my collectors don't look like us. It's probably a higher percentage than that. I'm being generous, right? But working with Richard, we getting our people to work, but but you know, I mean, a lot of the spaces and places that I show at, they don't look like us, and like, I mean, I'm honored to be able to talk to you guys because there's some questions that I usually get that I don't have to ask because we already understand what's going on.
There's a contemporary artist in which your work is reminiscent. It reminds me of his work. He's a good friend of mine, and I wanted to know if you were familiar with him, Fahamu Peku.
Yes, I know Fahamu's work out of Georgia. I actually just went to one of his shows. When was the Atlanta Art Week? I think September or whatever. I went down there.
Yeah.
Yes, it's similar in the fact that we both use acrylic. He does a lot of self-portraiture. One of the big differences, he does a lot with African spirituality because he's African and he practices that spirituality. There's some similarities in that sometimes there are like African artifacts in my work, but that's just because I'm African American. And when I do incorporate that stuff, like those are masks and things that I have in my house, right? So, like I said, once again, I'm telling my truth. So I only paint like if I have access to it or it's real, like I paint it. But I don't yeah, our stories are so different, and he's like photorealistic. There's some differences, but yeah, I know his work.
Yes, so I was just curious, because you said you're not really interested in going like the teacher route,
Yeah.
and you enjoy the freedom of, just kind of doing your own thing, but do you at all think about the more commercial side of being a painter and like, kind of appeasing the market, or are you strictly like, I'm just gonna, follow my gut and do kind of what I want?
So I do think about the commercial side all day, every day, because this is all I do, so I have to. Do I think about appeasing the market? No, because my market is my market, right? One, I'm already put into a box because I'm a black painter, right? Two, my subject matter. So I do things like, I don't want to advertise another gallery, but like, if I'm sending the work somewhere else, I know what sells in that market. So I'm gonna make what I'm gonna make. But now it's just like, I have to divide the pie up. Like, okay, I know this, like this show had to be in Brooklyn. This show had to be in New York, right? This is not something I would show necessarily in North Carolina. But I have work that I know I can show in North Carolina. So I think about the commercial aspect in that way. It's like, okay, I'm gonna make what I'm gonna make, right? Like some days I might make an R&B album, and I need to, right? And I'm gonna send it here, right? But sometimes it's fight the power, and I have to send that here, right? I'm not showing this in Alabama, right? I'm not showing this in Oklahoma, like, so it's just like you just have to know, figure out the markets, see who's doing what, where, and where you can fit in.
I think you answered the question. So there's a difference between North Carolina and Brooklyn?
Definitely.
Jewish Hill, all right. So again, what would that be?
The culture is different. So when I go to institutions and I go to galleries and spaces, there are black people, yes. But I don't know if the black people share my same experience, right? So I don't think my experience is like a Southern experience necessarily. Like I have roots in the South.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can speak to some of the things, but for the most part, I think my work, there's like a grit in it that you can tell that I'm from somewhere else. Like how I have an accent, but my accent isn't necessarily Southern, but I don't really sound like I'm from Brooklyn that much anymore either.
Yeah.
So it's like somewhere in between, and I think that's like how my work is.
Gotcha.
So when I show it here, people are like, oh, he's gotta be from here. And I show it in North Carolina, they're like, he's not from North Carolina, but so it's that kind of thing.
Last question, what do you listen to when you paint?
Well, I did make a soundtrack for this show, which usually plays during while we're open. So it's a mix. So a lot of times I listen to a lot of Nipsey, with just the Victory Lap is like my favorite album. But I always listen to, there's some Biggie, there's some Jay-Z, there's some Nas.
Really enjoy your work. I have a question about you as an artist, I guess. A lot of your work has black people featured in green, and I was talking to the gentleman here earlier, and he was telling me that it kind of like you want to be able to transform what black people look like. So I guess my question is, what do you think, and like what is your vision for black people in the future? Like a lot of your work echoes what we have to deal with in the present and in the past. So like, what is your vision for the future?
I think it's hard for me to think about making work for the future when I'm so concerned about like today. I'm not really an Afro-futurist, right? So like, I don't really put much thought into that. Yeah, it's really just like, I'm so focused on like now. Hopefully the work in the future doesn't look like this. Right, hopefully the stories I make today, people don't relate to in 100 years, right? I want them to be able to look at it like it was history, because if they relate to it, that means we're still going through the same things, right? And then that means there's been no progress.
It's really impressive to hear you and to see this work. It's my first introduction to your work. It's really uncompromising. And I'm wondering when you decided to not be a classroom teacher, to kind of raise the ceiling, open the aperture of what you could do in terms of financial security, how did you learn the business and the commercial side of things? Because many artists who want to make uncompromising work struggle, maybe make less than a classroom teacher attempting to do it on their own. So what was your process to stay true to your purpose and figure out the business economics of it?
I mean, you know how to say ignorance is bliss? That's kind of, so part of it was when I first started, I didn't know any artists that were successful in like terms of making money. And I always thought artists couldn't make money. So I wasn't necessarily doing it to make money. At first my whole goal was to be able to pay my bills, right? And figure it out that way. And it was like, I had no representation, but I could sell a painting a month and pay my bills, right? And that's how it started. And then you start networking, and I talk to a lot of other people who aren't in necessarily art, but they're entrepreneurs and they have their own businesses. And I would learn their strategies and figure things out that way. And then I would just apply that to my practice. And it's really relational at that point, right? And I never have been in a situation where I had to filter my work. My work has always been my work. So I tell everybody, like, you find your crowd or your crowd finds you. So I never was trying to make work to go to a certain place. I just made my work, and like, if a place accepted it, that meant I'm supposed to be there. And if they don't, then that place is for another artist. I mean, there's plenty of room for everybody, right? So that's how I make my work.